Well, hello there everyone. I want to start this video by saying thank you all so much for 10,000 subscribers. This was a big milestone I wanted to reach, and honestly, I got here a decent bit sooner than I expected to. Anyhow, I put it to a vote for what video I should make, with an overwhelming 51% of y'all voting for a top 20 hardest bosses video. It was so decisive that if this was politics, it wouldn't even go to a runoff. But regardless, I'm sorry to say I won't be able to fulfill that promise, because I'm going to make a top 30 instead. What can I say? I like giving myself extra work for no reason. Now, before we get started, I do want to clarify a few things. First off, a boss isn't necessarily good or bad just because it's difficult. I love some of the fights on this list and hate others. Second, in my 27 years on this planet, I have played every single video game to ever exist and will ever exist, and therefore everything I say in this video is an objective fact, and if you disagree with me or think something else should be on here, then just know that you're wrong. Now, before we get started, let's cover some honorable mentions. Okay, first up, honorable mentions would be Simon from Clair Obscure Expedition 33. When I fought this boss, he was a demanding test of precision, leaving very little room for error and expecting your A game, and I loved the fight, coming into it with my own build and focused more on suboptimal stuff, but it was fun. However, as the intended last super boss of the game, you can come in here extremely overpowered, and while I fought him legitimately, it's not that difficult to have so many buffs and attack boosts stacked that you can essentially one-shot the second phase and skip his third phase entirely, so he doesn't make the list even if I do love this fight, and think it is still a pretty good challenge if you're not using those one-shot builds. Second up is Sephiroth from Kingdom Hearts 1, who is a good challenge, true, but in KH1, if you're level 100, it's not too difficult to come into this fight armed to the teeth with elixirs and just spam things like Strike Raid to more or less invincibility your way through a large portion of the fight. Still not free, but the fact is, unless you're doing like a low-level Proud Mode run, he's not as bad as some people think he is. And the last honorable mention would be Makuri the Ice King from Dino Blade, because this game was effectively developed as a high-effort shitpost. It's actually quite good. With this guy being an absolute behemoth of a final boss fight and having 2 full health bars to chunk through, I was heavily debating adding him to the list, and probably would have if not for the Ankylosaurus spirit, giving you health back upon blocking or parrying attacks. Once you stop getting overwhelmed by his attacks, it's a lot easier to just take it slow and outlast him with parrying, especially if you have the summoning spam build set up, because parrying also restores your SP, allowing you to just keep spamming out summons. And now for some dishonorable mentions. The first would be Yggdrasil Core from Etrianacy 1, and really put any shitty Atlas super boss here. These fights really aren't difficult, they're just terms and service lists that are super scripted, as the Yggdrasil Core has you follow his 50-turn script, or you take over 2,000 damage in a game where the health cap is 999. And this is kind of the case for many other Atlas super bosses, where you have to follow one very specific strategy with no room for deviation or you're dead. There are good super bosses made by Atlas, but that's more from recent games, and a lot of their older games, they were all kinda shit. And the other dishonorable mention is Lingering Will from Kingdom Hearts 2. You may say it's a hot take, but it's pretty easy to just use Fenrir and negative combo, and suddenly the game's ultimate challenge is dead in a minute with just some basic rhythm. Normally, I'd probably make him an honorable mention, but Kingdom Hearts 2 fans love to glaze this game's difficulty because they forget that you're still able to level up in critical mode. Now, that's enough stalling, let's get on with the real video, and here's your big ass spoiler warning right now. If you're afraid of some video game boss being spoiled, I don't know why you're watching this, but I'll at least give a heads up before the big one.
What still here? Hand it over, that thing, your dark soul.
I'm going to start off by saying right now, some of these fights in the lower end of the list I can fairly reliably beat now, but they gave me enough trouble throughout the years that I think they owed their due, and in the case of Slave Knight Gale, he was kind of my original DLC final boss fight that required me to lock in to win. 3 distinct phases, a metric fuckton of health, and a massive arsenal of attacks at his disposal as the swan song to the entire Dark Souls trilogy. He wasn't just one of the greatest boss fights ever made, but also a challenging boss to cap off the game, and when I first played the DLC in 2017, I think he felt like an absolute height in boss difficulty for me, especially because I actually didn't find Midir that difficult. But Gale is an awesome fight, from his savagery in Phase 1 to the more refined warrior finding his resolve in Phase 2, until you get to the final phase where he's losing control of the power he's absorbed and you're effectively fighting the Dark Soul itself, with some excellent boss music to back him up. Nowadays, I can fairly reliably win against this boss, but he's always an opponent I have to actually focus if I want to have a chance. And every time, that victory still feels awesome to achieve. The positivity will fluctuate wildly throughout this video. Number 29, the Egg Viper, Sonic Adventure 1. Like I said, the positivity is going to fluctuate a lot because I fucking hate the Egg Viper, and if you want to know why, then get a load of this. The boss will jump out from below and fire lasers at you at your location and behind you, and sometimes he'll actually try to cut you off, and then you have to basically just react for less than half a second and know to get out of the way. Then you have to homing attack his weak points over bottomless pits, chaining multiple in a row. Normally, homing attacks aren't an issue, but about 3% of the time, they're going to fuck up in Sonic Adventure 1 because it was one of the first big 3D games made to rival Mario 64. And you know what? I genuinely like and respect the hell out of this game that's as old as I am. But while the jank is usually just minor things that can be worked around or get used to, it becomes a larger problem in the arena where something like slipping up means instant death. This is not helped by a second phase where he starts destroying the arena, and you have to get on his buzzsaw platforms to reach his head and homing attack the cockpit. And I'll fully admit I've missed the shot a few times, once again leading to death by falling into the abyss, or at least wasting an attempt, which you don't have a lot of because this boss loves to destroy the arena, and when you run out, you're gonna die. Especially when he runs out of HP and decides to kamikaze you at the end, and this attack has killed me before. I mean, I can fairly reliably dodge it nowadays, but on principle, I despise any boss that has an insta-kill final attack they use after you've gotten rid of their HP, even if it's easy to dodge, because what if I fuck up? Why yes, Stardream Solo OS will be appearing on this list, thanks for asking. Number 28, Avatar Belial, Grand Blue Fantasy Versus. I don't play a ton of fighting games outside of Versus and Smash Bros, so I know for a fact this isn't the hardest boss in the genre. If you want to go on a rant about SNK bosses and Magaki in the comments down below, feel free, go for it. Anyways, Belial is actually a bit more straightforward than a lot of bosses in Versus, as he's technically playing by the same rules as the player. He's just hopped up on cocaine and quite possibly Viagra, given it's Belial. This man can take to the sky, attack you from any range and keep the pressure up, and spends a good third of the fight unleashing skybound arts, with increasingly more aggressive combos, and will punish hesitation or passive play, but also won't let you get away with being blindly reckless. However, unlike more notoriously difficult fighting game bosses, this one is actually pretty fun, so I don't really get super annoyed when fighting him. That being said, on hardcore mode, even though you have a massive cast of characters to select from, I've only been able to successfully beat him with Jita. Sometimes it pays to pick the most basic character as your main in a fighting game. It's a very fun and cool fight, but I'd say it's also about as tough as I'd personally like for a fighting game boss to be, because it doesn't flow over into being frustrating for me. Number 27, Galdera the Fallen, Octopath Traveler 1. I would say in terms of pure turn-based combat against a boss with just beefy stats, Galdera the Fallen is the hardest boss there is. Let's look at the sheer numbers. It's almost double the level of any of the story final bosses. It's still a solid 15 to 20 levels above the other post-game super bosses. There's no save points in this dungeon, so failure means playing through the entire Gate of Finis dungeon, and it's 8 bosses all over again to even have a shot at Galdera. And then you have to get through the Omniscient Eye phase, which is a delicate balancing act of disarming a nuclear bomb. Then you face off with the Fallen, getting multiple attacks per turn and another 500,000 total HP, making this the only boss in the game with a 7-digit health bar when none of the other bosses were even cracking 300k. And even when you get to his final phase that's able to brutally murder you, he's still able to lock out 3 of his 5 weaknesses at random, and he can also change them at random. So you're gonna honestly need some luck on your side if you really want to win, or you better be ready to spend multiple days, not hours, days, grinding up every single party member to level 75 or more to stand a chance. And that does mean all 8 party members and no, characters not in your active party will not gain experience. Yes, it is very tedious. I hate this boss, and honestly, I'm never going to fight him again in Octopath Traveler 1. Now, I will say, I think his lore is cool, so I'm actually glad they kept him around for the other games, Octopath Traveler 2 and 0, but his original appearance was not a winner. But difficulty-wise, I'd say he's about as hard as a pure turn-based game can get without being scripted bullshit or having some other fancy gimmicks going on. There will still be some more turn-based games on this list, but they're not going to be following the strict rules that you see in your regular turn-based RPGs, and that'll make more sense when I get to it. Number 26, Gilroy the Absolute. Ender Magnolia, Bloom in the Mist. Gilroy is an awesome final battle, but he's also a very difficult one. I do want to say, I can't tell you how happy I was when I got to the true final boss fight of this game, and it wasn't another wall boss that has plagued so many Metroidvanias, especially in more recent years. As for the fight itself, I'm primarily looking at his blighted form, guarding the game's true ending, because it's essentially just a enhanced version of his normal final battle. That being said, it's a pretty basic warm-up with Phase 1, but Phase 2 starts having him busting out a comedically oversized sword to slice you with, and his third phase has him take to the sky, and this would act as the second and final phase of the original battle. It's pretty tough. He rains down projectiles and he creates dark orbs constantly, essentially forcing you to have mastered Lilac's air mobility if you want to stand a chance, until you break his mask and enter his new final phase where he's going to repeatedly set up area denial attacks, then start performing other attacks on top of them, all while having the highest damage output in the game, being able to kill you in a single attack string. He's a boss fight that loves stacking mechanics and just building off of his earlier battles. And you know what? I'm down for that. It's an excellent battle to act as the true ending, and in my opinion, it's a great way to cap off the best Metroidvania ever made. Number 25, Commandant Alexei, Tales of Vesperia. I remember playing this game as a teenager and was genuinely thinking Alexei was gonna be the final boss with how much he was built up throughout the game's second act as the big bad, especially with the intense boss music and the waterfall surrounding you as the arena slowly ascends into the sky. He's got a ton of health, he hits hard, he has a large arsenal of attacks, and will start spamming his Mystic Art Brilliant Cataclysm multiple times over and over again. He's extremely hard to kill, not only because he has high stats, but he has an art called Guardian Frost that not only is an AoE attack that protects him from damage and damages enemies around him, but also recovers tens of thousands of HP, and not only does he love to do it immediately after stunning your party with a Mystic Art, but he's also more than happy to just straight up spam it multiple times in a row, and he recovers his super armor relatively quickly as well, and can go into overlimit often, which allows him to just spam whatever the hell he wants because fuck you. And while Gattuso was the boss that started my worst difficulty spikes video series, this guy is the hardest mandatory boss fight in the game in my opinion. Honestly, even tougher than the final boss, because you can get so cracked by the end of the game that they don't stand much of a chance. I will say, the feeling of satisfaction for kicking his ass though was extremely satisfying for teenage me. Number 24, Ravenbeak, Metroid Dread. Okay, I don't know what the general discussion is on this fight, but other than most people liking it at least, but don't get me wrong, I think the fight's awesome, but holy crap, if it's not the hardest boss in the entire Metroid series. This boss does not screw around, and you have to be on point with your parrying if you want a chance at surviving. And sometimes it feels like you need a third hand if you want to be able to control everything. To say nothing of his energy shield being able to make him invincible unless he's parried, and then him using some non-parryable attacks quite often. So yeah, even the first phase of this boss fight can be quite the handful, especially with his dangerous combo attacks he can do. And then phase 2, he grows wings and loves spamming unparryable attacks and giving you not a whole lot of chances to get your health back, on top of being able to quickly blast you in the face with the Zero Laser. I'd say this phase is easier than phase 1, but it is a major drain on your resources if you're not careful, and on top of that, well, you've got to just be on top of your game at all times. Most Metroid games are fairly easy, especially near the end game when you're super overpowered, but Dread is a hard game and Ravenbeak is honestly the hardest boss in said hard video game. And of course, we can't forget Phase 3, where he decides to rip off his one remaining wing, brings back the aggression from Phase 1, the big lasers from Phase 2, and now has a portable sun he can unleash for good measure. And while I know this is going to sound crazy for Hollow Knight fans, I honestly find Ravenbeak to be the toughest boss from any 2D Metroidvania I've played. Though I still do have to play 9 Souls, so jury's a bit out on that one. Number 23, Yorihime, Touhou New World. Touhou is a weird series with so many fan games and so many different genres. People think games will be preserved through ports and emulation, but no, it's going to be preserved through Touhou fan games, acting as one-to-one recreations of the original product it's based off of. Anyways, I originally got Touhou New World because it was styled after games like Ys Origins and Oath and Felghana, and yeah, I actually do enjoy it. However, being a Touhou game, the bullet hell can be quite intense to deal with, but standing far above all else in this game is Yorihime, as her story fight is the hardest mandatory battle in the game, and her post-game rematch is the hardest boss in the game with the highest stats in the game by far. She's got both relentless melee combos and bullet patterns to deal with. She can unleash as well as 2 separate bomb attacks, and far more health than anything else in the game, making her able to easily outlast any sort of blitzkrieg strategy you may use. So instead, you have to find ways to stall out the boss as best as you can, and as well as come in with the maximum upgrades, maximum healing charges, and be on point with your parrying, because she's not fucking around, and her bullets can get so overtuned it starts lagging the game, which is always a concerning sign. It's satisfying to pull off this fight and execute successfully, but it is a very intense challenge to beat this titan of difficulty. But if you think this entry was silly, wait till the next one, it's going to get even goofier. Number 22, the Fusa Swarm, Madagascar for the Nintendo DS. Who else had this game back on the DS when they were young, and why was it actually a pretty good 2D platformer? Anyways, as goofy as this level seems, the reason it's hard is quite simple. You have to control 2 separate characters at the same time, while both Marty and Alex have lost all of their abilities for this one level, and there's a new weird control scheme where you have to protect the lemurs and get enough of them to safety, but watch out, because if the Fusa attack them, not only will they die, but your rescued lemur count will decrease. So it's a boss where you can lose it all basically instantly, never mind your now invisible health bar, or the time limit constantly ticking down and being less than generous. I distinctly remember needing my sister's help to beat this level, with us having to play together in order to win. Definitely a goofier entry, but it was a genuine wall I was stuck at for quite a long time as a kid. And seriously, what was it with licensed kids games and ridiculously difficult final bosses or levels back in the day? Notice that was kind of a pattern for those? Maybe it's just me. Who knows? Number 21, Seven Force, Gunstar Heroes. Another awesome but extremely difficult boss fight. I do want to clarify this is only talking about him on hard mode or above, because this boss is called Seven Force and he has 7 different forms, and you'll have to deal with all of them on hard mode in order to win, making this the toughest fight in the game by far, as it's one hell of an endurance test after a less than easy level and the largest arsenal of attacks in the game. The fight kicks ass, and before the likes of Platinum Games or From Software, Treasure was the original creator of kick-ass boss fights in their video games, and I highly recommend checking this game out. At the same time, however, having to chunk through 7 health bars when each form has as much health as a full boss fight can make for a pretty dangerous endurance test. Some forms like Blaster Force and Urchin Force aren't too bad, but then you have Phoenix Force, which can be a pretty tricky precision test. Or Crab Force, which can turn into an insane reaction test, all the while you somehow have to keep damage on the boss while dodging everything. Definitely get Electric Chaser if you can, because not having to worry about actually landing attacks here is a godsend. As far as retro bosses go, I'd say he's the hardest one I've faced that isn't some BS like a nigh undodgeable hitbox snake monster that kills you instantly. And while I'm sure those are worse, I'd rather talk about games I like on this list, or at least have more interesting things to say about. Number 20, Loxasia the Complete. Hey Christian, where's that Liza P boss ranking? Well, you can blame the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, because after I beat their second battle, my save file corrupted and I lost everything. I've heard horror stories about Arlecchino in the DLC, but I haven't had the chance to face him. And while I enjoyed the game enough to replay it, I didn't like it enough to give it yet another go after my save file corrupted in the final stretch of the game. Anyways, Loxasia is a Sekiro boss, except you have stamina, and she'll do some random ass combos where she spams the same uppercut move 13 times in a row, because she's that annoying kid in a fighting game, and quite honestly, that's the only attack I even remember from her first phase. Phase 2 is definitely better, with her going for more of a sword and board approach as well as lightning, which would suck, but since you can parry the lightning back at her, it's actually quite awesome. And you can break her shield, which is cool. But she's still a hyper-aggressive boss with attacks that are either lightning quick or slower than molasses, with plenty of gotcha attacks thrown in out of spite. To be honest, I never really took to Liza P like other people did. I just thought it was pretty good, and you know what? That's okay. You don't have to like everything under the sun. Number 19, Allmind. Armored Core, Fires of Rubicon. I love Fires of Rubicon. It's still one of my favorite games of all time, and at the very end of the game's third and final ending, you have both one of the best and toughest boss battles From Software has ever put out. By my personal estimate, the third toughest. Anyways, his first phase isn't too bad actually. With Redshift equipped, it's comedically easy to dunk on him. And then of course the real boss shows up and we're given a 2v3 with us fighting alongside Air while battling Allmind and her two sea spiders, making a boss that requires you to stay aware of your surroundings. It's tough, but with good sound design and radar, it's actually not a big issue to deal with. Then, Iguazu gets so salty his sheer force of will overpowers Allmind, and suddenly it becomes a 1v1, with this man having all of his attacks from the earlier phases, while also carrying the Moonlight Great Claws, and while his moveset is simpler than many in-game bosses, you still have to think about your vastly expanded range of movement, and the boss is designed specifically to account for that. It will put you through the ringer and force you to give it your all if you want to come out the other side. But it's so good that I don't really care. This fight's awesome, but it's also very difficult. Number 18, Prometheus. AI Limit. And now for another awesome boss fight coming from, in my opinion, the most underrated Souls-like out there. Prometheus does not screw around. As a powerful swordsman with a gauntlet to boot, he can conjure his weapons to attack you, as well as bathe the land in golden fire, and for his second phase he even pulls out a spirit bomb that erupts flame pillars, and then he gets even more fire waves that get shot out. He's an aggressive boss, and one of the few I've seen in a video game that can actually parry you just as much as you can parry him, so keep that R1 spam in check or else. But the real challenge is the obligatory second health bar, where he goes from swordsman to battle master, as he has access to every weapon in the armory like he's Gilgamesh or something. I'll let you decide which Gilgamesh I'm referring to. But this means he has so many attacks you'll never see all of them in a single run, and not even on your 5th or 6th battle against him. And of course, as the final boss of the game's first and currently only DLC, free DLC by the way because the devs are cool like that, he is hard. But while he doesn't hit as hard as other difficulty juggernauts, he makes up for it in durability and having a Swiss Army knife of an arsenal, on top of having a sync gauge in phase 2, so parrying him no longer staggers him until it's completely depleted, and he can get it regained by attacking you. And despite my multiple fights against him, I'm sure there's still plenty of movesets I still haven't seen, as he has an answer for everything. He's anime Soul of Cinder, and I live for that shit, but at the same time, that also means he hasn't gotten any easier over my multiple fights against him, and I could see him moving up in the list in the future simply because I don't think he's ever really going to lose his difficulty level, like some other bosses, even when I do get better at the fight. But at the same time, thanks to the free DLC adding the boss rematch, I'm free to fight this boss as much as I want to without having to do any file trickery, and time has not made my opinion of this game wane at all. I do genuinely think it's an underrated gem that punches well above its weight, and I am curious if the more story-driven DLC being worked on will have something even tougher than this guy in store. Guess we'll have to wait and find out. Number 17, Gialva, Ys Othenfelgana. But after we fly so high, sometimes we come crashing down in a fiery explosion, as Gialva is a boss that loves to stay out of your range, and moves in 3 dimensions in a 2D boss arena, all while being able to deal over a third of your HP on easy mode in a game with no healing items. And the arena is also covered in spiked platforms that, due to poor programming, will hit you multiple times when they flip. And your fireball does both jack and shit to the bat, as it's also on fire. I despise this boss, absolutely fucking hate it, and it was the reason I rage quit the game back in the day when I first played it. And I know the devs thought it was overtuned because the remaster nerfed his aggression and made him borderline passive. And they also made it where burst mode restores your HP, when that shit did not happen in the original. A lot of people love this game and say it's the best Ys game, and I cannot disagree more when awful bosses like this exist in the game, and a lot of the crap in Ys, Oath, and Felghana is very front-loaded as well, so honestly the first third of the game is just not that fun. Number 16, The Love Nightmare, Mary Skelter 2. And time for the horniest game on this list. Look, I said I played a lot of games, not that I'm proud of all of them. Commentary aside, the Mary Skelter games were interesting, combining first-person dungeon crawling with horror elements, giving each area essentially a stalker that chases you throughout their level, while also acting as the big boss fight at the end of each particular level. And while the first game set the stage well, the sequel decided to make the nightmares an actual threatening presence because this game is a whole lot tougher, and nowhere is that seen more than the true final boss fight against the Love Nightmare. Effectively, this game is a what-if story where Jack and Alice, the first game's protagonists, more or less died at the beginning of the game. We have clones of them on our side going through their own existential crisis, but the game's true final boss fight is against the corpses of the original Jack and Alice merged together inside this flower, because, you know, symbolism and shit. And what is it with women inside flowers making for extremely difficult final boss fights? Foreshadowing is a literary device. Anyways, not only does this boss have more HP than anything else in the game by a country mile, not only does it have 2 health bars, and not only are Mary Skelter 2 characters statistically much weaker than their counterparts from the first and third game, but this boss is packing attacks that love to hit your whole party for a ton of damage, inflict severe poison, which will kill you and does a lot of your health every turn, and infection on your party members as well, which means you can pass that shit on like it's 2020, which was also when I played this game actually. On top of that, it has attacks that seal your skills, and attacks that hit random party members over a dozen times, which means it can very easily kill up to 3 party members in a single hit, and you just gotta deal with it. And it's not super easy to just heal off the damage either, because party healing skills in this game either have to be charged up or cost a ton of SP in this game, and only 3 characters in the game are actually capable of using items for offense or defense or healing. And, as a bonus, Skill Seal turns off your passive abilities as well, which means 2 of those 3 characters can't use items if they have skills sealed, and you can no longer see the boss's HP either. And in case you're thinking this still doesn't sound too bad, well, despite this being a turn-based RPG, you can't take your time in this fight because this boss is classified as a nightmare-type enemy, which means if you take too long to make a decision, they'll start acting in real time, skipping turns, and sometimes even attacking you while you're making a decision. It's a really tough and somber final boss fight, backed up by the track Bloodstained Soldier, which is a remix of the first game's normal battle theme slowed down and in a minor key. But hey, at least after it's all over, we get to enjoy our true ending, right? So it was here I was reminded that true ending does not equal good ending. Number 15, Promised Consort Radahn, Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree. Alright, here we go. Consort Radahn is the final boss of Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, considered by some to be the ultimate challenge From Software has made, and others to be something so overtuned it jumped the shark. And for me, I mean, yeah, he's difficult, but I don't think he's some impossible opponent. Now, to be fair, I definitely think the nerf to his recovery frames was needed because his cross-slash was straight up broken. But aside from that, I genuinely think he's one of the most fun fights in From Software's library and a solid challenge. But I also use a shield, so according to some people, my victory doesn't count because people love self-imposed challenges, I guess, and they gotta force it on others or something, I don't know. What do you mean you didn't beat the game with your left hand broken and only using your index finger? That victory didn't count. Anyways, I don't think anyone really has complaints with Phase 1. Most people think it's a pretty fun fight, maybe barring a cross-slash. Phase 2, on the other hand, while I don't think it's bad, I definitely agree, it was a problem taking the performances and was way too bright with the light show at launch, so I was glad that got patched. Now, in terms of damage, this fight is intense to be sure, and definitely the toughest in Elden Ring, but I actually like the light beams because they force you to either stick super close to Radahn and play hyper aggressive, or dodge in the proper direction, and it's fun for me to just tank right up in front of his face and go blow for blow with him. And, well, also he's got like the best song in the game playing for the boss theme. Sure, if you're someone who has to no damage everything, I can see the issues, but I mean, I play Yu-Gi-Oh! And we burn life points as a resource there. I know I'm not really going into why this fight is hard, but I think you can see why he's hard on screen, but also why there's more than one way to go about fighting him, and I didn't even mention things like spirit summons. Number 14, Stardream Solo S, Kirby Planet Robobot. I stand by my statement of this boss being harder than Consort Radahn. There, you could build however you wanted and throw yourself at the boss again and again without issue. Here, the game not only has you slog through a 20-minute boss rush just to take another attempt in a 20-minute plus boss fight, but it also says, fuck you, we're playing Star Fox now, which only ever came up one time before in the story mode, which was a piss baby easy fight, so sure, you've seen it before, but this is like saying I've driven a car once through my neighborhood streets when everyone's gone at work. So now I'm more than qualified to drive through Atlanta, Georgia at rush hour. And sure, there are people that will say this fight wasn't that hard, but there's far more that have told me how their save file is stuck at 98 or 99% completion because of this boss, which I think says all you need to know on its own. But if that's somehow not enough, then fine, Stardream Solo S, Phase, and Access Arc aren't too bad, just a bit hectic and a lot to deal with. But hey, it's another true final boss that's a drastic shift from the game's primary gameplay loop. I wonder if that's going to come up again in this list. Foreshadowing is a narrative device. The real issues begin when Timu Nova shows up because not only does he hit like a freight train when your healing is extremely limited and your health is likely reduced from the first two phases, but now you have to both defeat his wacky and weird attacks to get your Star Shot charged up high enough, as that's the only way you'll be able to quickly damage him, which you have to do because he's counting down from 5 to your death with a nigh undodgeable fatal error attack that does entirely too much damage. And keep in mind, this fight still has nothing to do with the main game's playstyle. And sure, people will say, oh, it's scripted. That doesn't really help when you're essentially sight reading because each death means running through the whole true arena over and over again, and there's 10 plus minutes it took you to even get to this phase in the first place after starting this boss fight. The boss doesn't burn you down per se, unless he explodes everything and kills you that way, but God knows he's exhausting to fight, and while he can be satisfying, he can also be massively frustrating to deal with. And that doesn't even include the heart, which finally uses the regular gameplay style once again, and while this fight primarily loves to psych you out with big explosions, his damage output is also ridiculously high and very dangerous now that you're over 15 minutes into this endeavor. And as a real kicker, even after he dies, he has a final attack that one-shots you and goes through most invincibility frames, which I think is just a massively dickish kick in the nuts. And I don't care if it's not that hard to avoid. I absolutely despise any mechanic like this on principle. Hey, you win, but here's an insta-kill fuck you at the very end of the fight after you already won. The more I think about this boss, honestly, the more I start to dislike it, so I'm gonna stop thinking about it now. Number 13, Copy X, Mega Man Zero. Viewers that have been around since the early days of this channel, like I'm talking the 100 subscribers days, may remember I consider this fight to be the worst video game boss ever made, and after a ton of arguments in the comments, I stand by my statement that this boss fight is still the absolute horse shit, and I will not be changing my opinion on this matter. It's the worst fight ever made. But why is he so bad? Well, the first phase is alright. He has his dragon armor and a decently large moveset where he can change his elemental affinity a lot, albeit as much of it's a cool idea on paper. Since there's no way to quick change your element, it kind of falls a bit flat, but that's just more limitation of it being an old game and an early GBA game. His attacks aren't too threatening. The real issue is he does contact damage, so Unfortunately, a lot of the fight is more so playing footsie because him randomly jumping into you or touching you from walking into you is what's going to actually do damage. It's not too hard, it's just kind of annoying. The real issue comes when he turns into his Seraph form, and on one hand, it's a fairly simple matter of hit the head, and he only has 3 attacks. However, the head is a super small hitbox that unless you're abusing some glitches with your charged saber slashes, you have to jump off of his spike pillars suspended precariously over bottomless pits. And of his 3 attacks, one of them is setting the platform below on fire, requiring you to wall jump off the pillars while the platform is going to be off screen, so you won't even know if it's safe to land half the time. I mean, there is a sound cue, but it's a GBA game. Sometimes the sound gets overridden. Gravity rings don't damage you, but instead trap you in place and force you downwards, often into the bottomless pit. And he also has a spread laser attack, and good fucking luck dodging this attack. Most of the time, you're gonna die from the bottomless pits, and every time you die, you not only have to fight phase 1 again, which is fine, but you gotta sit through his 2 different unskippable cutscenes, to the point I have these lines memorized. Thankfully, in the remaster, you have infinite continues and can keep throwing yourself at this boss, but in the original, you had a very limited number of lives, and Mega Man Zero didn't have any reserve tanks outside of Cyber Elves, so his fire and lasers very quickly turned into death by a dozen cuts, as those still hit hard enough that death was fairly likely. I despise this boss, and I've saved my footage of my winning run against him, so I'll never have to fight him ever again. I have no plans of fighting him ever again, and quite frankly, this fight is so shit that it actually makes Bed of Chaos look not that bad in comparison, at least to me. Number 12, Hades, Kid Icarus Uprising. I want to specify this is strictly trying to beat him on Intensity 9.0. This fight is absolute blood hell, no ifs, ands, or buts, with 6 different phases to contend with, ranging from dramatic but still relatively easy in the first phase, outside of his big tornado attack, which you have to watch out for, to the second phase, where you have to deal with his endlessly respawning face cannons that fire projectiles really quickly, until reaching his third phase, where half the screen is covered in bullets, and while people will say that his attacks are extremely scripted, yes, that is true, it doesn't change the insane barrage of bullets coming your way that home in on your location, and on Intensity 9 everything hits like a truck. So of course the phase ends with us cutting Hades in half, and he's still not dead, as we now have to deal with the hardest phase, where he fires off blue and purple bullets your way. Blue shots need you to hit them back, or you'll take unavoidable damage when they get close enough to the screen. Meanwhile, purple shots must not be hit, otherwise you'll be struck by unavoidable projectiles. And keeping track of this while also remembering to blast Hades can be a lot to juggle, especially when this boss fight is very long. Now normally there are generous checkpoints, but for the achievement you have to beat him on 9.0, which means you're not allowed to die at all in the fight. Thankfully, this is more or less the hardest part of the whole fight. After a 5th phase that's little more than an interactive cutscene, he starts looking more like James Woods' Hades, which I know rubs some people the wrong way, but as a high-functioning adult, there's value in not caring about the political opinions of celebrities and getting on with your life. The final phase is simply a matter of surviving his attacks until you unleash the Great Sacred Cannon in his face, finally being able to win as you erase his very body from existence. At least until the year 2037. You know, since Scott Bullock has long since retired, who do you think they'd even get to voice Hades in a new game if they brought him back? I'd be down for Alex Roshan. Number 11, Bowser, Mario and Luigi Brothership. Okay, I know some people will disagree with this, but I gotta be honest, Bowser is downright nasty in this game, with a bunch of vicious attacks able to knock your bros on their backs, as well as his very own bros attacks and other things that do a ton of damage. Plus, he has very high damage output, and the moves of all of his minions that will support him in the battle, giving him... Not only is the damage extremely high for a mid-game boss, but also he has the largest moveset in the game thanks to his minions, and with this being a Mario and Luigi game, you can counter everything he does, which is awesome, and if you perfectly counter his attacks, it's not too bad, and many of his combo attacks can be ended early. But if you slip up, Many times, his attacks keep going and becoming deadlier and deadlier, to the point where this is probably the biggest snowball effect I've ever seen in a video game boss, where the best strategy to win is to basically just no damage the fight, which is easier said than done. He has a massive array of attacks available. Maybe I'm crazy, but this fight just felt so much tougher than any other Mario and Luigi battle, and demanded a level of precision I've rarely had to have for this series. I don't hate the boss, actually I quite enjoy it, but this fight can snowball out of control faster than any other, and the fact that he's only about 70% of the way through the game just makes things even more intimidating because you don't have any overpowered gear yet. Number 10, Phalig and Primordial Darkness Saddam, Phantasy Star Online 2. Got a double entry here because I find both fights pretty hard for very different reasons, both of which are treated as the true final challenge of their episodes and story arcs, with Phalig capping off the Earth story arc, which is the second storyline, and Saddam capping off the final story line, which is the Photoner Saga. Phalig is the simpler boss because while she has a 7-minute time limit, that won't play a factor in this fight. Instead, her absurd damage output is what makes her difficult, combined with her ability to heavily repress the effects of healing items and spells, making them near worthless, so every hit matters in this fight, but thankfully it's over quickly once you can execute, especially with the power creep of the Scion class. I say that, but even though she's fairly simple, she's still absurdly difficult and will hit like a truck and kill you in about 3 hits or less, and again, your healing has been severely nerfed. On the other hand, Saddam has access to all the different elements, being able to change his affinities and weaknesses whenever he pleases, while having the largest moveset in the game, forcing you to adapt on the fly and deal with whatever attacks he brings out, whether it's roaring thunder devastating the land, fire scorching the horizon, earth shaking really violently, or ice storms that require you to take cover behind pillars. He's got it all. On top of a comedically large hand that can smack you upside the head, and he also breaks the level cap, so he will always be stronger than you are. On top of which, the ultimate quest version of this fight only gives you 15 minutes to win, which doesn't sound too bad, but this was the final challenge made for players, so he's demanding perfection. Anything less will end in defeat. Thankfully, your healing isn't suppressed against him like it is with Phalig, but he's got a Swiss Army knife of a moveset able to adapt to nearly anything and keep you on the move, all while 80% of this comedically large arena is a giant kill zone that's being shifted throughout the fight, forcing you to stay on the move, though thankfully the boss always stays within the arena as well, or it would be absolute bullshit. I'm still not sure which of these two fights I find harder. They're both very difficult for different reasons, but both are also still worthy of being in the top 10. Number 9, the Snowfrost Witch, East 10. On a normal playthrough, this fight is tough, but not too bad. However, the most fun version of this fight, and also most challenging, is on Infinity Mode, which is the version that's designed for New Game Plus. Originally, when you fight the boss, she's at the level cap of 99, making for a tanky opponent to be sure, but on Infinity Mode, her level has been brought up to 140, which is more than a little bit above your level cap. On top of that, Infinity Mode gives bosses new attack strings as well as increasing their speed for the definitive version of the fights, and it's awesome, especially for the ultimate super boss, but it's also extremely difficult because her first phase in witch form is very agile and has a lot of different attacks up her sleeve, as well as being one of the few bosses with a counter attack she can perform when recovering from being staggered, and a buffet of deadly projectiles to send your way. There's a lot you have to keep track of here if you don't want to die. And you should probably be expecting it by this point, but yeah, there's a second health bar. The real challenge is going to be when she enters her dragon form. This will not be the last woman whose true form is a giant monster that appears in this list. But in this form, she's just as aggressive as before, but now packing a lot more health up her sleeve, and her projectiles love to apply the death ailment, which thankfully in East 10 doesn't instantly kill you, but it will instantly bring you down to 1 HP, which is no bueno, on top of her being an absolute unit to beat and being able to regain her armor which effectively is going to make the fight last even longer because you have to break her armor to actually start damaging her HP, and she still has a bunch of different sword combos even when she's turned into a dragon. I hate this fight because I feel like this should be something awesome, but the fight sucks. He has one attack, he throws out triple projectiles, and then he teleports around a lot. And that's basically it for him. What makes the fight so hard isn't even him, it's everything else around him. Samur is just a teleport happy asshat, but he has infinitely respawning enemies joining the fray, and being a pain to hit for real damage, especially the Bloodmaker, which loves to tunnel vision you as the fight goes on, and it adds more enemies and obnoxious hazards, so it turns into a game of the floor is lava, and the rest of the arena is electricity, or Dread Knights and Pain Elementals, because fuck you. Doom Eternal is a game I enjoy, but I have to be honest, I'm not super fond of the Ancient Gods DLC. It feels a little too much like Weapon Swap Simulator, and while some people love that, it's not my thing. I have started my playthrough of Dark Ages though for the first time, however, and I am enjoying that a fair bit. But honestly, this fight is simultaneously a massive disappointment and an extremely frustrating one to deal with. I'm not a fan and I don't find him fun at all. Also, before we go on to the next entry, I know one of my friends is playing through Final Fantasy X right now, so I'm just going to give a big spoiler warning for it right now. Skip this next entry if you haven't unlocked the ability to travel with the airship yet.
Now! This is it! Now is the time to choose. Die and be free of pain, or live and fight your sorrow. Now is the time to shape your stories. Your fate is in your hands.
Lady Yunalesca. Ooh boy. Okay, Final Fantasy X is one of my favorite games of all time, but this fight gave me hell for the better part of a decade, and even nowadays, I'm still not guaranteed to win against her. Yunalesca isn't a boss that wins from hitting you with big numbers. Instead, she's exploiting every alternate win condition in the book, whether it be instant death spells, or turning you into zombies and casting full life on you, or poisoning you and letting you get chipped down that way, or any other bad status effects. It's not like you can just ribbon those away to victory. That shit is locked to post-game, or I guess behind killing a super boss, but you're not doing that in the main story. And unlike every other late game boss, Zanmato is not a free win button because she has 3 health bars and you have to chunk through each of them in order to claim victory. On top of that, her physical attacks dispel your buffs and anything you may have there, and she has the ability to zombify your party members, which she can then proceed to hit them with something like heal or full life or whatever, which will instantly kill them. And she can instantly kill your summons because she's a late game boss in Final Fantasy X. And then you get to the last phase where she opens up with Megadeth, which instantly kills all your party members, so the only way to not die is to have the party members being zombies, or have the very remote anti-death effect on your armor, which is probably not going to have unless you go out of your way to get it and then some, because it takes a while to get. But the problem with being zombified is that instead leaves you open to full life, one-shotting you, so effectively you have to juggle between her different attacks and find ways to get around getting one-shot by her, and her damage is not low or insignificant either. It's also hitting like a truck. And again, she one-shots your Aeons because she's a late-game boss in Final Fantasy X. I do like this fight, but unless you're comedically over-leveled from, I guess, grinding against a respawning super boss or something like that, the odds that this fight is going to be the toughest in the game. Even more so than even the final Aeon fight. That being said, it is a really awesome boss fight, and Final Fantasy X is one of my favorite games of all time, up there with Ys 8, Mario Galaxy, and Armored Core 6. So, it's still one I highly recommend playing. Just be ready to get put through the ringer against this boss.
That day, I pulled you from the battlefield, a starving cub. I had no idea what you'd become. Father, it breaks my heart. But I'm putting you down.
Owl Father is another boss fight I absolutely love, but holy shit, he is hard. Sometimes there are bosses that have the same abilities as you, but in this case, Owl can do everything you can do, only much better. With his own firecrackers, Makiri counters, which one-shot you, and every other dangerous attack under the sun. All the people I heard talk about how difficult Consort Radahn was at launch with their 100 plus attempts, I felt that way with this boss, as he took me over 70 attempts to beat. And for reference, when I played through this game last year for the video, I beat every other fight in about 5 attempts or less. And most things after the Mortal Blade was obtained were a first or second try victory for me. But Owl was here to humble my ass and then some. I love the fight. I think it's one of the best From Software has ever made, but the precision he demands from the player is unrivaled by any other, as you have to be on point if you want to win. And I know some people are probably thinking, oh hey, but what about Ishin the Sword Saint? I beat him on my 3rd try and I didn't have that much trouble this playthrough. This boss fight, well, Phase 1's already a super difficult boss battle, but then he gets to Phase 2, he busts out his bird spirit and starts doing bombing runs across the arena, and it's insane. And yes, a lot of Sekiro is about breaking enemy posture, but in the case of Owl Father, he recovers so quickly that if you're not absolutely perfect with your deflections, he will recover his posture immediately, making it necessary to focus on taking out his health bar. Even the jumping Mortal Blade, which annihilates a lot of other bosses in this game, only acts as a moderate inconvenience to him. This boss is the one where you have to lock in if you want to win, and honestly, has pushed me harder than anything else From Software has ever made, and I actually do consider him to be their hardest boss fight, at least from the dozen or so FromSoft games I've played, yes, even some of the weird ones. Number 5, Blood Moon Alcina, Rubinite. And now for the newest game to come out that's on this list, but I'm very confident her difficulty won't be dropping too much anytime soon. Why exactly? Well, because this boss kills you in a single hit. There are 2 hold charms in the game you can equip to allow you to survive an attack. That means you can at most take 2 hits in a boss with the largest moveset in the game, very quick, aggressive, and is able to put all of your skills to the test because you need to have everything prepared to counter her. Granted, her first phase is pretty easy, but once the Black Flame comes out, everything gets a lot more hectic, as it becomes a case of any unlucky hit can now spell the end of your life. And she's no longer giving you any downtime, so you basically have to enter a flow state if you want to win, especially against her smaller attacks that used to be less dangerous are now just as dangerous as her heavy slams and grabs and everything else in her arsenal. And then you get to the final phase where she takes you to some apocalyptic hellscape and the Blood Moon as the backdrop, and now all of her attacks have additional follow-ups with scythes flying around and towards you, and just like Owl Father, you have to be on point and on game. It's basically going to demand perfection from you, but unlike Owl Father, there is zero room for error unless you've equipped very specific accessories that allow you to take a single mulligan each. Another really cool final boss that acts as a great conclusion to the story, but oh boy, she is an extremely tough one. That's more than earned her spot among the difficulty juggernauts in gaming. Number 4, Lucilius, Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. While the boss theme says give praise for he has no equal, but I assure you this boss was knocked out of the top 3. At this point, you've probably figured out he hits really hard and has a ton of HP. That's pretty par for the course, but this boss also has a special surprise known as the 12 Labors, which essentially is a series of diabolical mini-games you're forced to complete and figure out with things like matching the color sigils. That's all fine and dandy, but then destroying all the feathers is a whole lot harder when you're constantly getting shot by lasers, and of course we can't forget about the Kreia stuff with him using all the different weapons we have to defeat, and the Paradise Lost as well. What's really unfortunate is that if you screw up any of these, then Ruin not only hits like a truck, but will permanently reduce your maximum HP. And that's not a slip up you can afford to have, so until you're good enough to finish a bunch of sadistic Mario Party minigames, so regular Mario Party minigames I suppose, you're not going to be getting very far. Even after that's all over, this boss is still one-shotting max level builds with the best gear setups imaginable, and the funny thing is, I actually think he's more dangerous when he's fighting you straight up as opposed to spamming ultimate moves, because at least when he's spamming ultimate moves you kind of know what to expect. That being said, this boss sure does love spamming ultimate moves because he's got about 17 of them, and they're all apocalyptic attacks to kill you super quickly, but at the same time, when he gets here, it's a little more predictable. It's just a case of, well, being able to survive and get the super attacks in and shred him when he charges Paradise Lost, rinse and repeat until the last 10% or so of his health. At that point, he's going to start charging up an attack called the End, which is basically just the Rage Quit attack, but there's so many ways to delay it that it's actually less of a DPS check and more of a victory lap against one of the hardest bosses I've ever faced. And to think, this guy is the weakest version of this fight because his Zero form, I'm convinced, is impossible to do in single player and is therefore not mentioned in this list, and he has a new level 300 form, part of Endless Ragnarok's DLC. Admittedly though, I haven't faced it yet, so I don't know, but at this point, we're well past anything being a 10 out of 10 difficulty, we're more like an 11 out of 10, and he's not even the last boss in this list with a final fuck you attack thrown in. Number 3, Estrella, Ass Lever Revision. Alright, get it out of your system. Now that that's done, this is another fight that is batshit insane, and before you even fight her, you have to destroy a giant machine made solely for sealing her body away. I'm counting that as a separate boss from her instead of Phase 1 because the game itself counts them as separate boss fights, which means Estrella is a two-phase boss fight that you have to defeat with no checkpoint between Phase 1 and Phase 2. Personally though, I find Phase 1 considerably harder as she has all of these different elemental attacks at her disposal and just absolutely shits out projectiles that all do very large amounts of damage, and that's not all, because in the world of Ass Libra there are a handful of different gods that remained in the world after some apocalypse millions of years ago, and outside of Meldine, most of these gods are optional super bosses at the end of the game, designed for, well, the strongest equipment and skills and ways to get you prepared for this final battle. And they can even be the ultimate summons you can achieve for each element. Yet, Estrella has all of their unique abilities that she's able to use for herself in addition to all of their strongest spells in the game, including ECM, which makes you unable to use items or summons until the designated nodes are destroyed, which means you can't heal either, and the boss can very easily kill you in 2 or 3 hits, if you're not prepared. That being said, if you have Magic Parry equipped, this fight can actually be a very fun battle despite how chaotic everything is, because you can parry so many bullets back at her that you can shred a ton of her HP off almost instantly. Sadly, that does not make this fight easy. Also, I'd wager a vast majority of my viewers are watching because of the Worst Difficulty Spike series, and there's one song I use in the series known as A Small Tale of Hope Against Despair. Yeah, that's her boss theme. But even when the Juggernaut with massive jugs is taken care of, we're not done as we have to fight her dragon form. And I'm giving you all an epilepsy warning right now because, well, it should be okay, but the boss flashes like crazy when taking damage, and if you suffer from seizures, maybe don't watch this segment. Anyways, this form is actually a fair bit easier than her divine form, as she can't shut down your healing, and her attacks are, for the most part, easier to read. Doesn't mean she's easy though, as she has far and away the most HP out of any boss in the game. Even on easy mode, she has more health than the strongest super boss on hard mode. That's how tanky this boss is, and she's still got an apocalypse worth of attacks up her sleeve that hit very hard despite, well, any other equipment you can come in here with. Especially bad is her eraser attack, which I have no idea how you're supposed to dodge it. And her atomic breath, which simultaneously is the best way to damage her by parrying all the projectiles back, but also slipping up means taking a ton of damage or dying, and sometimes she just opens the fight up with it and you're just kind of fucked. I do still think this phase is much easier than her divine form, but it's also a whole lot longer, and you are very likely to slip up at some point, because it is an unforgiving endurance test. And after you finally win, she reveals she was just testing you the entire time because she wanted to make sure humanity would be strong enough to survive, which I guess the question is, what would have happened if we lost to her? But I suppose at the same time, Estrella is the one rewinding time whenever you die or reload a save point, because even before you make a pact with her, she's the one with dominion over time itself, so she already knows you're going to be her champion and help save the people. But neat story moments aside, this fight is absolutely brutal, and also the last boss on this list that I like. Oh boy.
Auman chose me. By fusing Anubis, Auman can become real.
Look, the perfect fusion of Metatron, the destruction to end all!
Motion sickness warning, I guess. Anyways, who fucking boy, I've talked about this guy a time or two, but he is the hardest action boss out there. No ifs, ands, or buts. What makes him so difficult? Let me count the ways. First, he can absolutely shred your HP, and there's no healing opportunities allowed in this boss fight, so what little HP you got's what you have to work with. Second, he's immune to anything except your regular melee attacks, so any other gear you've obtained is worthless. Third, he's fast as fuck, boy! Fourth, he can litter the arena with projectiles that home in on your location and require zero shift to avoid. Which can honestly, zero shift's not good in this fight because it can send you right into one of his other attacks and you have to eat it face first. Fifth, he has attacks that are unblockable. Sixth, he is able to block your melee attacks, so it's really tough even scoring damage. In fact, the only reliable way I found to damage this boss was to do this weird sort of thing where I fake him out, where I dash backwards, then immediately dash back in and stab him for a single hit of damage. I'm not counting anymore, but he also has a rage mode he can go into where he becomes invincible and his melee attacks do even more damage than before, able to take over half your health in a single combo, if not fully kill you on hard mode. And the boss moves so quickly that you're liable to get motion sick, and worst of all, he's able to drag in some hexagon plate things that'll start to heal him, undoing the damage you've dealt. And he's not guaranteed to even be vulnerable when doing this, so your only option is to destroy the hexagon plates to try and mitigate how much HP he's recovering, because otherwise your only real choice is to go fuck yourself and watch all your work go down the drain. Plus, sometimes he'll just attack you during this. He's not supposed to be able to, but he does anyways because fuck you. Sure, fights like Consort Radahn are hard, but at least when I hit them, the damage I dealt stayed. This guy can just undo all of your progress, and his health gets lower. He's gonna block even more often. And it's not really a fight you can attempt again and again either, because the entire boss fight demands you're mashing buttons like it's a Mario Party minigame, so you'll be physically exhausted after just 2 or so attempts. The only reason this isn't the hardest boss I've ever faced is that at least it doesn't one-shot me, and it still plays by the rest of the game's rules more or less. The same cannot be said for number 1. It couldn't be any other boss. If you've played Drakengard 3, then the hardest boss in a single-player video game is the Zero Flower, and there's no room for discussion on that. But why, you may ask? Well, because it's making you play a rhythm game, except it's a really bad rhythm game. Okay, that's a bit disingenuous. Let's be more honest here. The sound of the flower pulses don't really match up too well with the visuals very well, even at the start, and it's only going to get worse. Initially, It seems pretty quaint, but if you miss a single note, you're dead, and the timing is not easy, partially because the time signature changes throughout the fight, as does the tempo of the song, because each sister has a different theme that plays, and oddly enough, for most of them, it's not even their own theme. But the real final boss fight is the camera. Now with 0, it's easy, and with 4 and 5, it's slightly wonky, but it's nothing too crazy to deal with. But then you get to 3 and she starts taking the piss and doing comedic zoom-ins, and all hell breaks loose when you get to 2, because not only do the notes come out far more frequently, but the camera gets even more hectic. And then the game goes from being obnoxious to actively just fucking with you as 1 comes out, because I am going to vomit. And yeah, that means we have a rhythm game with unreliable visual indicators. And okay, I get it. It's symbolism and all that. Mikhail doesn't want to kill 0, so the fight is supposed to intentionally be asinine because he doesn't want to say goodbye, and Yoko Taro and all that bullshit, blah blah blah. And all that, I get it, but little known fact for YouTube commenters. You can understand the deeper meaning behind something and behind intentionally asinine game development and still think it sucks. Your best chance for beating this boss is honestly to read the sheet music, listen to the song without gameplay, then just throw on a blindfold, because the visuals are just gonna make you sick. You have to just feel the rhythm yourself, essentially. That was actually how I beat this fight. And it's really not helped by the fact that near the end of the fight, the song is slowing down in real time as the camera fades out while the boss keeps attacking. And since the music slows down, so does the timing of the attack and blocking it, in good fucking luck. Oh, and as a bonus, it has one last attack during the final bit of dialogue that you can't see at all. So until you realize you need to guard the instant Mikhail says, you're gonna get killed at the very end of the fight and have to start it all over again. So for quite a few people, they got to the point where they thought the fight was ended, and then you got the cutscene, "Hey 0, yeah, followed by a game over." Honestly, I don't think this fight will ever be topped in terms of difficulty. It's out of left field and so fucking absurd, it goes right past infuriating and wraps around to being comedic, though at the same time it kind of really sours the emotional impact of things for me. I don't know. I love Drakengard 3, despite it being a janky mess of a game, but man, this final boss fight ain't it. At least the music's nice.
It was really, really fun.
I'm glad. Mikhail,
Yeah?
it's almost time.
Okay.
And that is going to do it for this video. Wow. I would say that was a lot longer than I intended, but no, that was all self-inflicted. Anyways, thank you all so much for 10,000 subscribers. This was an insane milestone for me, and I could not be happier. I hope you enjoyed this video half as much as I enjoyed making it. I don't have any bigger plans going forward. I'm kind of just playing it by ear, so thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time, and whatever comes after this. Until then, take care.